This is a hallway with no walls, and for 200 years, it was the coolest, most comfortable spot on the entire property. On the hottest, most miserable afternoon of a southern summer, when every room in the house was baking, there was one place a family could go to actually feel a breeze. It wasn't a room, it was the gap, the open, roofed passage running right through the middle of the home, or connecting one part of it to another. Americans called it a breezeway, and the name is not poetic. It is a literal description of what the thing does. It makes a breeze. It manufactures moving air out of thin, still, heavy heat, and it does it for exactly $0, using no power, no fan, and no moving parts at all. You've probably walked through one and never thought twice about it. That covered, open-sided walkway between an old house and its garage, that shady central passage that cuts straight through a certain kind of old farmhouse. For generations, this wasn't a quirk. It was one of the smartest cooling strategies in American building. So effective and so obvious that it showed up everywhere, from frontier log cabins to the mid-century suburbs, and it even caught the eye of the most famous architect this country ever produced. And then, like so many pieces of the old breathing home, it quietly disappeared. We stopped building it, and worse, we took the ones we had and sealed them up. So the question, once again, is simple. If a breezeway cooled a home for free, why on earth did we stop building them? And this one has a fascinating answer, because the breezeway didn't just die once, it died twice. But to understand that, you have to understand the beautifully simple science that makes a breezeway work, because it's doing something genuinely clever with the air. Let's start with what a breezeway actually is. In its simplest form, it's a roofed, open-sided passage that connects two structures or two parts of one structure. Think of a covered walkway with a roof over your head, but open air on both sides. Sometimes it connects the main house to a detached garage or a barn. Sometimes it runs right through the center of a single home, splitting it into two halves, joined only by that open passage under one continuous roof. It has a roof to keep the rain and the direct sun off you, and it has open sides to let the wind blow straight through. That combination, shade above and open air on the sides, is the entire trick. Now here's why it doesn't just sit there, but actively cools. Two pieces of physics are working together. The first is cross ventilation, which just means air moving in one side and out the other. But the second piece is the real magic, and it has a name: the Venturi effect. Here's the idea. When moving air gets funneled from a wide open space into a narrower channel, it speeds up. The same amount of air has to squeeze through a tighter gap, so it accelerates. You feel this every time the wind picks up as you walk between two tall buildings, or when a river runs faster through a narrow canyon than across a wide plain. A breezeway is a deliberate wind funnel. The house on either side catches the gentle, lazy breeze drifting across the property and squeezes it into that narrow roofed passage. And as it squeezes, the air speeds up. So the breezeway isn't just as windy as the yard. It's windier. It takes a breeze so faint you can barely feel it standing in the open, and concentrates it into a genuine, steady, cooling draft right where the family is sitting. And that moving air does two things for a human body. It carries heat away from your skin, and it speeds up the evaporation of sweat, which is your body's own built-in cooling system. That's why a moving 85 degrees feels dramatically more comfortable than a still 85 degrees. The breezeway doesn't lower the temperature of the air by much. What it does is put that air in motion, and moving air is the difference between suffering and comfort on a hot day. Even better, because the passage is roofed, it's shaded, so the air moving through it hasn't been baking in direct sun. You get shade and wind at the same time. The two things a body craves most in the heat, delivered for free. Now let's go back to where this began, because the breezeway's first life is one of the most distinctly American pieces of architecture there is. Picture the American frontier in the early 1800s, in the hot, humid South. Settlers, many of them German and Scots-Irish families, pushing into Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, needed shelter, and they built what they could with what they had, which was logs. A single log cabin, a single pen as it was called, was a stifling box in the summer heat. So they hit on a brilliant solution. Instead of building one big cabin, they built two smaller ones, a short distance apart, and ran a single roof across the top of both, leaving the space between them open on both ends. 2 rooms, 1 roof, and an open air passage running right down the middle. This was the dogtrot house. It got that name, so the story goes, because the shady central passage was exactly where the family dogs would trot through and flop down to escape the heat. And honestly, the dogs had the right idea, because that breezeway was the coolest place for miles. Typically, one of the 2 cabins or pens was the kitchen and dining side, and the other was the sleeping and living side. And that open passage in the middle, usually 8 to 15 feet wide, was the true heart of the home in summer. It was where the family actually lived when it was hot. They'd put chairs out there, work there, shell peas and mend clothes, and take their meals there, and even sleep out there on the worst nights, because the dogtrot pulled a breeze through when every enclosed room was dead and stifling. The 2 solid cabins on either side funneled the wind into the passage. The Venturi effect sped it up. The roof kept the sun off, and the whole arrangement turned a brutal climate into something a family could live in, using nothing but clever geometry. There was no other option. There was no electricity, no fan, no air conditioning. The shape of the house was the air conditioning. These dog trots spread across the southeast and became a signature of the region. Some grew from humble cabins into substantial homes and even inns. There's a place in Texas, the Fanthorpe Inn, built in the 1830s as a simple 2-room log dog trot that grew into an 18-room stagecoach stop and post office, hosting figures like Sam Houston. And it kept that central breezeway the whole time, because in that climate, you simply did not give up your best source of cool air. And here's what tells you this wasn't just a poor man's necessity, but a genuinely brilliant design. The architects noticed. When America's most celebrated architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, began his career, he understood exactly what the breezeway did. One of the earliest formally designed, published breezeways in American architecture was his, back in 1900. And it became a recurring tool for him. In his Usonian homes of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, the affordable, practical houses he designed for ordinary Americans, Wright used breezeways to move air and to blur the line between indoors and out. At Taliesin West, his winter home and studio in the Arizona desert, begun in 1937, He built a central breezeway that deliberately used that Venturi effect to draw cool desert air through the complex. He took the same principle those frontier settlers had figured out with logs and elevated it into high architecture. Other modernists did the same. The breezeway wasn't a relic to these designers. It was a sophisticated, climate-responsive idea worth building into the future. Which brings us to the breezeway's second life. And this is the one your own grandparents probably remember. After the Second World War, as America built its vast new suburbs, the breezeway came roaring back in a new form. This time, it wasn't connecting two log pens, it was connecting the house to the garage. In the 1950s and 60s, an enormously popular suburban house design featured a covered, open-sided breezeway linking the main house to a detached garage or carport. And it served the same purposes it always had. It gave you a sheltered, shady walk from your car to your door out of the rain. But it also funneled a cooling breeze right up against the house, and it created a wonderful covered outdoor room, a place to sit in the shade on a summer evening with the air moving through. This was the great age of indoor-outdoor living, and the breezeway was central to it. Famous mid-century developments like the Eichler homes of California used breezeways to channel cool air and to connect the home to the outdoors in exactly this spirit. For a couple of decades, the breezeway was once again a normal, expected, beloved part of the American home. So how did something with two separate golden ages, something loved by frontier families and famous architects and post-war suburbanites alike, vanish so completely? Here is where we get the answer to why the breezeway died twice, and both deaths come back to the same cause we keep meeting: AIR conditioning. The first death is the one you can already predict. When affordable air conditioning swept through American homes in the middle of the 20th century, the entire reason for the breezeway's cooling function evaporated. Why carefully shape your whole house to funnel a natural breeze? Why sit out in the passage to catch the moving air when you could close every door and window and let a machine chill the sealed interior to any temperature you like, regardless of whether there was a breeze that day at all? The dogtrot's genius, its passive cooling, became irrelevant the moment cold air came out of a vent. As a cooling strategy, the breezeway was simply retired. The same way the whole house fan and the transom window and the sleeping porch were retired, made pointless by a machine that did not care about the weather. But the breezeway suffered a second death that those other features mostly escaped. And it's a uniquely cruel one. Once the breezeway stopped being useful for cooling, people looked at it and saw something else: wasted space. Here was this covered area, already roofed, already part of the footprint of the home, and now it was just an open, uninsulated passage that served no purpose in an air-conditioned life. And Americans wanted more indoor square footage, so they did the obvious thing: they enclosed it. That open breezeway between the house and the garage got walls and windows slapped on, and it became a mud room, a laundry room, a den, a hallway, a little extra bedroom. The open dogtrot passage got sealed up and absorbed into the conditioned interior of the house. The breezeway didn't just fall out of fashion, it got eaten. Millions of them were converted into ordinary enclosed rooms, and the moving air they once channeled was walled off and forgotten. That's why you rarely see one anymore. It's not only that we stopped building them, it's that we systematically closed in the ones we had. Now, I promised you honesty, and the breezeway needs it, because the title's promise of cooling the whole house for $0 deserves a fair, honest look. Here is the truth. A breezeway is a genuinely effective passive cooling tool, but it is not a machine, and it comes with real conditions. First, it needs a breeze. On a dead still, windless day, a breezeway has very little to funnel, and its cooling power drops off sharply. Second, orientation is everything. To work well, a breezeway has to be aligned with the direction the summer wind actually comes from, which in much of the southeast is the south or southwest. Build it facing the wrong way, perpendicular to the prevailing breeze, and it becomes a lovely shaded passage that doesn't ventilate much at all. Third, and most importantly, it does nothing about humidity. It moves air, which helps your sweat evaporate. But on a thick, muggy, motionless night, it can't dry the air or truly chill it the way an air conditioner can. And fourth, in a cold climate, an open breezeway is close to useless for a good chunk of the year. As one designer put it plainly, in a cold climate, that open passage is essentially dead space for 5 months out of 12, a frigid, wind-whipped gap you hurry through rather than a place you'd ever want to sit. The breezeway was born in the hot South for a reason. It is a hot climate tool, and pretending it's a universal solution does it no favors. So, it's not free whole house air conditioning. What it honestly is a brilliant way to make the hot months genuinely more livable, to create the single most comfortable spot on the property, and to cut down dramatically on how often you need to reach for a machine in the right climate, oriented the right way. That's not a scam. That's just an honest tool with honest limits. And here's why it's worth knowing about right now. Because the breezeway, like the rest of the breathing home, is quietly coming back. As energy costs rise and architects rediscover passive design, the dogtrot has become a genuine favorite among designers building efficient, climate-smart homes, especially in the South. Modern architecture firms now sell dogtrot-inspired house plans, updating the old form for contemporary life. The 2 log pens become a bedroom wing and a living wing. The breezeway in the middle, instead of being a rough working passage, becomes a beautiful covered outdoor room, screened against insects, roofed against rain, oriented into the summer breeze, and it becomes the place the family actually chooses to spend its time in mild weather, eating, relaxing, working, cooling off. They're building them with insulated panels and sometimes solar on the roof, marrying the 200-year-old geometry to modern efficiency. The people rediscovering it are finding exactly what those frontier families knew. The coolest, most pleasant room in a Southern home might be the one with no walls at all. And that, in the end, is the quiet lesson of the breezeway, the same lesson hiding in every one of these forgotten features. We didn't stop building them because they failed. The physics never changed. Wind still speeds up when you funnel it. Shade and a moving breeze still cool a human body exactly the way they did in 1840. We stopped building breezeways because a machine made us feel we no longer needed to think about where the wind came from. And then, hungry for square footage, we took the beautiful open passages we already had and walled them shut. We traded the coolest room in the house, the free one, the one that ran on nothing but a summer breeze, for a few hundred more feet of air-conditioned interior and a monthly bill to keep it cold. The breeze is still out there. It still blows across your property on a summer evening, free for the taking, the same way it blew across those frontier cabins and those mid-century suburbs. The old builders knew how to catch it, how to squeeze it, how to send it right through the heart of the home. We just roofed it in, sealed it off, and forgot that the shape of a house could ever be the thing that cools it. So the next time you see one, that covered open-sided passage beside an old house, or that suspiciously hallway-shaped room that clearly used to be open to the outside, take a second and picture it the way it was, open on both ends. The summer air rushing through, faster and cooler than anywhere else on the lot. A family in the shade, comfortable in the heat, paying nothing at all. That was the breezeway. And a growing number of people are starting to wonder why we ever closed it in.